Interview: Japanese sword expert on getting his Demon Slayer fittings in museums. Japanese sword expert Paul Martin wants people to understand what's so special about Japanese swords. He's created the Japanese section at the British Museum and works with Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism to promote sword tourism. He's hired master craftsmen in Japan to make the sword mounts, or koshihari, a Tanjiro sword for Demon Slayer. The Subo handguard is currently on display at the Aizu Wakamatsu Old Samurai Academy, and Martin has plans for the rest of the mountains as well. Otaku USA talked to him about the meaning of the Japanese sword, the attraction of Demon Slayer, and where people can learn more. How do you first get interested in Japanese swords? My father practiced karate, and I started at the age of 7, so I grew up during karate. That led to me watching Kurosawa movies, and a movie called The Yakuza, with Takakura Hin and Robert Mitchum. There was a samurai connections with the Kurosawa movies. It uses a sword in the Yakuza. The Yakuza movie is surprisingly deep at some parts. Leonard Schutter, who wrote the original book, lived in Japan for a long time, was married to a Japanese person, and he had great understanding of Japanese culture. How do you promote Japanese swords? I translate books and exhibitions, and I made documentary DVDs. I was executive producer of a documentary called Forgive, Don't Forget. The director had swords in his family from after the war that his grandfather brought back. Where he decided they wanted to return one of his swords, so he documented the whole process. It revealed that the Japanese sword means the Japanese people. It wasn't just a mere weapon, it had deep spiritual meaning. The original owner survived the war, but he passed away. By the time the documentary happened, when his sister has given the sword back, she said, "His soul has finally come home." I made another documentary called The Art of the Japanese Sword, where they interviewed lots of different sword makers and craftsmen and showed the different processes of making a sword. I also started doing Japanese tourism work. I was appointed as a specialist by the Japanese Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport. I advised them that now to promote sword culture and samurai culture of the world. What would you tell people who don't know much about Japanese swords or convey what makes them so special? It was a journey for me too. I grew up in a different country and I thought they were just very cool weapons. But they're not merely weapons. They're very beautiful art objects and have been as long as the sword has been around. They are Kamakura period, 1192 to 1333, scrolls of a man admiring the beauty of the sword. Therefore, because he could see the beauty of the steel, this is proof it was an art object at least as far back as the Kamakura period. This is the earliest evidence we have that practice probably goes back even further. The swords were never the primary weapon before the swords would be used. There were bows and arrows, and yari, spears with a long shaft. In the Second World War, the mass produced many swords. This was more for propaganda reasons. They tried to cultivate samurai spirit and get the public to do what the military government wanted them to do. What did you want to make the Demon Slayer wantings? I don't normally watch anime or read manga, but I got caught up on Demon Slayer. The representation of the sword in the series has spiritual aspects that reflect the ways in which many Japanese people feel about swords. I think the three main characters are complex. You have Tanjiro, who wants to be benevolent and kind, but many of us are like a bull in a china shop, like in Inosuke. And like Zenitsu, many of us spend our time worrying about things. When it actually comes to it, we have that fight in us. I think the clear divided personalities of those three characters are a combination of the characteristics of every single person, which is why I think they appeal to many of us. In Japanese swordsmanship, there is a Buddhist type conundrum: the life-giving sword and the death-dealing sword, Kazuchiken Satsu Jinto. Obviously, there's a both the same sword, but it's up to the user how he uses it. Tanjiro's sword is very much a Katsuchigen. Nowadays, there are no sword-wielding warriors per se, but in Japan, they're gradually spreading around the world, and Japanese sword martial arts, they are no longer used for military purposes, but the practice of the lethal techniques is regarded as a way to improve one's own spiritual potential as a human being. So in a way, by practicing these arts, we are slaying our own demons. As I live and work in the center of the Japanese swords world, I wanted to see what a real Tanjiro Nichirin Koshirai would look and feel like if it wasn't made by genuine Japanese sword craftsmen. I also wanted to use it as a method to attract the current generation of anime and manga fans into the world of genuine Japanese swords. I firmly believe that anime and manga are the current gateway to Japanese swords. My generation was Kurosawa films, Talking Rumble has massive effects. He has brought out female Japanese swords creators, and I think the marvelous, the more creators, the more people studying swords, it's brilliant. What are you doing with the mountains? Depending on which scenes you look at in the anime or manga, the mountains slightly change. I choose Suba, handguard, that had 6 spokes. And then I thought, nah, I want one with more spokes, like they have in the movie posters. The first sword guard that I made is now in Nishikan, the old Aizu clan samurai academy in Fukushima Prefecture. I feel very honored that my sword guard is on display in a real samurai academy. The Nishikana Military Academy was widely known throughout Japan for its academic excellence. It was established in 1803 for the children on high-rank samurai in the Aizu clan. In the late Edo period, the Aizu clan from Mutsu Province, Fukushima Prefecture, was under the command of 9th generation Lord Masadaira Katamori, who was a cousin to the Shogun Yoshinobu Tokugawa. The mean that the Aizu clan were the most trusted allies and confidants of the Shogun. I think it is a wonderful day by displaying my Tanjiro sword guard Nishikan is acknowledging that the future generations of caretakers of Japanese culture, historians, sword enthusiasts, martial artists, and curators may be among the current generation of manga and anime fans. This is a trend we have been seeing over the past decade, with lots of sword-based anime, manga, and online games like Samurai Champloo, Rurouni Kenshin, Takorambo, Gintama, Demon Slayer, etc. Furthermore, the Emperor Gotoba has also recently been in the subject of sword manga in Japan, as I'm trying to raise awareness for our Emperor Gotoba 800 project. The complete set of Tanjiro's Nishirin mountains are going to be sent to Okinoshima, Oki Islands, Shimane Prefecture, where Emperor Gotoba's grave is, and put it on display at the Gotoba Museum. What is the Gotoba 800 project? Emperor Gotoba was active in the 12th and 13th centuries. In the run-up to the Jokyo Rebellion 1221, he invited the best swordsmiths in the land of the Imperial Palace and is said to have taken part in sword making himself. About 12 of these blades still exist. There is no absolute proof he made them, but it's become part of the sword legends. Swords said to have been made by him have a hairline engraving of the chrysanthemum in the base of the blade under what's called the habaki, a retaining collar. Unfortunately, he lost the rebellion and was exiled to the Oki Islands for the rest of his life. However, he was allowed to continue his sword making there. This year marks the 800 years since his exile to the island. It is such a fantastic place and he's been to the island 5 times. I don't usually say this, but his grave was a real power spot. I get goosebumps every time I visit there. As part of the events to celebrate the 800th anniversary, I'm trying to raise money to have 10 to 12 swords made. So we can donate them to his shrine. His original band of swordsmiths at the palace and on the island were called the Kukoban Kaji. In the Showa period, like 1926 to 1989, a group of swordsmiths was created and called the Showa Kobakanji. I would like to continue the tradition by creating a Kobakanji for every future generation of swordsmiths and recording their swordsmanship by having the swords donated to the shrine. Where can people learn about you and Japanese swords? I have my webpage and my YouTube page. I have a documentary on Emperor Gotoba uploaded, and I'm currently making one about Kondo Isami and Shinsekomi. I am planning to making a whole series of samurai short stories.